Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating text called The Transparency of Identity, and we're going to approach this a bit differently. Instead of mystical language or spiritual woo-woo, we're putting on our calm, objective teacher hats. We're going to look at this as a literal masterclass in human perception. We'll strip away all that heavy cultural baggage and look directly at the actual mechanics of how our sense of self is structured. Okay. Let's jump right in and dismantle the single most persistent myth about this entire topic. The source text hits us with this profoundly clarifying statement right out of the gate. Enlightenment is not becoming special. Just think about how radically that flips the script. Culturally, we always code this concept as, climbing a mountain, unlocking an achievement, or gaining some kind of spiritual superhero status. But the text asks us to completely drop that framework. It's not about adding to who you are. It's actually a profound subtraction. To really grasp this shift, we're going to logically step through the mechanics. We'll cover the illusion of specialness, the collapse of ownership, the paradox of connection, the transparent boundary, a clear before and after comparison, and finally, what it actually means to be fully here. Starting with part 1, the illusion of specialness, and moving past the myth. So, if this isn't about becoming special or getting supernatural powers, what exactly is happening? Well, the author defines enlightenment simply as the total collapse of false ownership. Let's just calmly examine that phrase for a second. False ownership. It implies that the way you and I typically move through the world involves this constant, quiet claiming of things that don't actually belong to us, right? We claim our thoughts, our feelings, our physical bodies, our jobs. We treat them as absolute property. This paradigm shift, it's simply the moment that claiming finally stops. Which brings us to part 2, the collapse of ownership, and what remains. Naturally, you might wonder, if ownership collapses, does my everyday reality just vanish? Do I just float away on a cloud? Not at all. The text explicitly points out that the physical world, your body, your mind, your family, society, all of it remains exactly as it is. You don't disappear. You still have a physical form, you still use your brain to get through your day, you still love your family, and you still live in human society. The external architecture of your life is completely untouched. The crucial takeaway here is that while the world stays exactly the same, it's our internal identity that changes. It stops clinging to these things as me or mine. You're in your body, sure, but as the text notes, you aren't reduced to your body. You use your mind, but you aren't trapped inside its constant noise. You love your family, but you aren't possessed by the guilt or expectation of it all. You live in the world without being owned by its rewards, its rankings, or its fears. The stuff of life remains, it's just the psychological grip that completely loosens. Let's look at part 3, the paradox of connection and belonging to nothing. This brings up a really fascinating paradox. Letting go of ownership actually connects us more deeply to reality. First off, because you are no longer reduced to your body or possessed by society's expectations. Nothing owns you. You don't belong to anything. As the source beautifully puts it, the separate self no longer needs a cage called identity. You are entirely free from that heavy, exhausting burden of constantly defending some rigid concept of who you're supposed to be. But at the exact same time, because that defensive boundary between yourself and existence becomes transparent, nothing is separate from you. Literally everything becomes part of you. When you aren't walled off in this little fortress of me, the entirety of existence just flows through the same shared field. So you belong to nothing, yet you are deeply connected to everything. And objectively, this illustrates why there is no conflict in this state. Because think about it, conflict inherently requires a separate defensive center to protect. To be at war with life, you have to have a localized, rigid self that feels threatened. When that defensive center dissolves, well, what's left to be offended? What's left to be threatened? The friction just disappears because the resistance is completely gone. Moving on to part 4, the transparent boundary and living in the field. So how does a human being actually function when operating without that defensive friction? Living in this new, transparent field, you still act and feel, but that false knot, the one demanding that things must either complete us or destroy us, weakens. Because everything is part of the same continuous field, you just stop fighting the natural flow. Pain isn't automatically rejected. Pleasure isn't endlessly chased. Thought still happens, but it isn't worshipped as the ultimate truth. Silence happens, but you don't force it. Death isn't denied and life isn't possessed as property. You're simply observing the natural rhythms of existence with complete, unbothered clarity. Now, for part 5, before and after enlightenment, the paradigm shift. To really visualize this, let's look at the objective mechanics of this transition side by side. Before the shift, our minds create these absolute, isolated statements of identity. Things like, I am this body, I must protect this self, the world is outside me. It's incredibly exhausting and defensive. But after the shift, notice how the language completely turns into a calm observation of events. It's just, body is happening, fair is happening. There is no owner found hiding behind the curtain. Nothing is outside the whole. The experience absolutely continues, but that heavy fictional experiencer has quietly stepped off the stage. Which brings us to our final section, part 6, being fully here prior to imagination. In this final step, we are stripping away the mind's last illusions to find the absolute deepest, most foundational state of human awareness. Now, our minds love to conceptualize enlightenment as seeing blinding light, feeling eternal bliss, or experiencing cosmic unity. It generates endless visions of gods, symbols, and overwhelming emotional freedom. But true enlightenment? It's just direct perception. It is prior to imagination itself. It's not imaginary, it's not emotional, it's not intellectual, and it's certainly not a belief. It is the raw, direct perception of reality exactly as it is, entirely unvarnished by our mental storytelling. It is the foundational awareness. It's the seer before the image is even formed. Even before your brain can label something as good, bad, beautiful, or ugly, there is simply the raw capacity to see, and that pure capacity is what remains. It's the profound silence that exists just before a thought arises in your brain. Actually, if you paid really close attention to your own mind right now, you can almost catch it. That brief, incredibly quiet gap of pure awareness that precedes the very next sentence in your internal monologue. It is the open space that precedes any boundary or name we try to project onto reality. The text describes it as the witness before the name. It's the calm, unmoving canvas upon which the entire painted world of our human experience actually takes place. This leads us to the text's most concise and honestly beautifully stated summary of everything we've talked about. Enlightenment is being fully here without being captured by anything here. That perfectly balances the entire paradox we've been examining. You are incredibly present, way more present than ever before, because you aren't lost in a defensive storyline, but you're completely uncaptured by the pain, the pleasure, or the narrative of the moment. You are finally, truly, just here. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to examine your own center. If you stopped claiming ownership of your thoughts and feelings right now, if you simply let life happen without trying to own it, what would truly change about your present moment? If fear is just happening, if joy is just happening, and you calmly observe them without claiming them as mine, how much lighter would your very next breath be? Take that objective observation with you into the rest of your day. Thank you so much for exploring this with me.